My name is Kelly Jones Sharp. I'm the Director of Communications and Education for the ACLU of Indiana. Welcome. Environmental justice is not unlike criminal justice or social justice or other forms of justice, in that the folks least able to fight for their rights are those most often exploited and abused by the system. In 1787, the founders of our Constitution could not have imagined a United States of America that would waste and destroy its environmental resources to benefit a small percentage of Americans. Just as they did not imagine the technological advancements that threaten our individual freedoms, and that Americans would readily accept these intrusions of our privacy under the false bargain that giving up our liberty somehow makes us safer. It's hard to see how there will ever be protections for the environment enumerated in the Constitution in a country too weak-willed to demand adequate funding for environmental protection and sensible regulation. The glimmer of hope lies in the preamble, where it says, "The document was established to promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity." Our moderator today, Jim Poyser, almost needs no introduction to this group. He's the managing editor of Nuvo Newsweekly, the alternative voice in Indianapolis that's on its way to becoming the relevant voice in Indianapolis. Jim's team recently launched an all-new Indiana Living Green magazine that's available up front, with the lofty goal of raising our collective consciousness about concerns for the environment in Indiana and beyond, in order to make the world a healthier, more livable place for everyone. Thank you, Jim, for being here today. We'd like to thank our panelists, who you'll meet in a moment, Fraser Designs, WFYI, and Nuvo, and the Center for Inquiry Indiana, who all partner to make this event possible. I'd also like to recognize Gilbert Holmes, ACLU Executive Director Emeritus, who just retired this past weekend and who has joined us here today. Special thanks go to Larry Rubin and the Rubin Foundation for generously funding the ACLU of Indiana's outreach and education programs, including today's event. Please throw your name and email address into the bowl that's being passed around to win our door prize today, a reusable bag of green and civil liberties goodies. Thank you so much for being here, and now I give you Jim Poyser.
Hello. All right, I pay a lot of attention to news about the environment, and I want to just give you a sample of the past 2 weeks. Actually, I think this is from March 27th. Just a little sampler. 2001 to 2010 was the warmest decade on record, with 9 of those 10 years in the top 10 ever recorded. February was the 324th consecutive month in which global temperature exceeded the long-term average for that month. 10,000 computer model simulations of future weather overseen by researchers at Oxford estimated a potential temperature rise as much as 5.4 degrees by 2050. And get this, a self-acknowledged Republican meteorologist said this yesterday: "I'm going to tell you something that my Republican friends are loath to admit out loud. Climate change is real." All right, so all this warming should be cause for alarm, but instead it is intriguing. It is triggering a mad gold rush of oil drilling in the melting Arctic Sea. The assault upon the environment by industry and everyday consumers has reached unprecedented levels, and I'm hoping the panel can cheer me up. A new study out yesterday shows that Roundup alters the morphology of amphibians. The pesticide group known as neonicotinoids has been all but confirmed as a major culprit in the bees' colony collapse disorder. Yesterday, news for the first time, white nose syndrome, which is wiping out millions of bats, has been found west of the Mississippi. The new flame retardants that they created to replace the toxic predecessors are now showing up in the air around the Great Lakes. in increasing concentrations and is traveling as far north as the Arctic and the Tibetan Plateau. Rockport Works in Indiana is the #1 polluter for the most polluted river in the country, the Ohio River, with 24 million pounds of toxins discharged in 2010. My litany is almost over. A study released Thursday in the American Sociological Review concludes that trust in science among conservatives and frequent churchgoers has declined precipitously since 1974. The assembled panel here can likely speak to all this and more, but they are also about solutions. I just like to complain. All right, so the subject of this panel discussion is whose air, water, soil, environment, etc. is it? The answer is easy. It's all of ours. What's completely befuddling to me is, and complex, is how we're screwing it all up globally. So perhaps we can have some enlightenment today from this esteemed panel. Rather than go through the bios, which is perhaps standard, I'd like each person, we'll start with Pamela on the left, to talk about the concept of eco-justice briefly and in the lens of through which your position at IUPUI. So sort of like introduce yourself and what you do, a brief comment about eco-justice, and then we'll go back through and dig in deeper.
My name's Pamela Martin. I'm a professor at IUPUI. I teach in the Earth Sciences Department and in geography, and I'm the director for the Center for Earth and Environmental Sciences. I'm new to Indianapolis. I just came here in August. And one of the classes I teach, which speaks to what we just heard about, is global warming, and another is climate change, past and present. And my research there is looking at the impact of food and dietary choices on climate and other aspects of the environment. So I think if you want the personal intersection with eco-justice, by definition, it's the unequal exposure to environmental hazards in all forms to people. And that intersection for me is in the form of our watersheds, our food sheds, and our air sheds. And I think about that in the context of what our food choices, how that affects it, as well as our lifestyles. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Kim Ferraro. I'm a public interest environmental lawyer. I'm also the current and new Director of Agriculture and Water Policy at the Hoosier Environmental Council. Before I became part of HEC in my role with leading a nonprofit environmental law practice, I've represented citizens in citizen suits on environmental matters. And so I think the intersection between eco-justice and my role is pretty clear. For the most part, average citizens, and especially those who are poor or minority, do not really have meaningful access to our court system or the political system. And so folks like lawyers and engineers and people with some technical expertise really need to step up to the plate and provide that meaningful voice in the process, because we're being outvoiced by the regulated industry across any sort of media who does have a very significant and well-funded voice in our political system and court system.
Hi, I'm John Gibson. I'm the state coordinator for Earth Charter Indiana's bicentennial initiative called Sustainable Indiana 2016. I'm here to cheer Jim up. I'm here to share a lot of positive stuff going on in Indiana, even though I know we are still breaking the 11th commandment almost every day, which is, thou shalt not mess with the forces of nature, for thou art small and biodegradable.
That's pretty good.
My name is Nate Jackson. I'm the executive chef at IUPUI. I I've been here for a little over a year here in Indianapolis. I spent on and off roughly 10 years in Bloomington, Indiana. Prior to being at IUPUI, I've worked in many different restaurants, James Beard restaurants, high-end resorts, ranches. I worked as a private chef and estate manager. And one of the commonalities that I saw in the high-end culinary field is the fact that the farm-to-table movement is very strong, and it's very inspirational. But what I also noticed is that the farmers who were bringing the food to the restaurant could not afford to eat at the restaurant. And so then it really got me to starting to think about the fact that I couldn't afford to eat at the restaurants I was working at, and which really led to a whole discovery of perhaps where we need to go from restaurants. And the idea was that we need to go to a form of industry, a food industry that involves a farm-to-table movement, but in a very practical way. And part of that practicality is essentially just getting back down to the basics of real food, and that's why I came to IUPUI. I work for a company called Chartwells, which is a company that is owned by Compass Group North America, is the largest food service company in the world. It might be a very strange decision, perhaps from the perspective of the audience, to go to a company like that, but I felt like it's a young company, and if I'm really going to make the change, I need to make the changes, and I need to prove to the people who are making the decisions in this world that we can and will start providing safe food for college students and children here in Indianapolis.
I'm already cheered up. But then I know these people, and I know many of you in the audience, and all the great and fantastic work that you are doing. So we're going to hear more from the panelists about some specific endeavors they're doing, and I'm not I don't want to do the take turns thing with this. I know you all can just step up, and you got something to throw in, please do. Before we get into some of those things that are going on in the present, again, I'm befuddled. I don't know if we have any anthropologists on the panel, but how did we get here? Have human beings always been profligate beasts? Is this any different than we've been for millennia? Was there a golden era where we were in harmony with the earth? How did we get here? We've known about climate change for quite some time. We've known about the impact of industrial pollutants, et cetera. Somebody want to take us back?
Well, I'll take a first stab, and I'm sure my co-panelists will jump in. It seems to me that we have gone from a place of living with the earth, and we'll take farming, for example, where we grew our own food, raised our own animals, where we had a real connection to our day-to-day needs and producing those ourselves, or someone else in our community maybe did it, and we would go to that person and buy our wheat or our meat for the week or whatever it was. We had a connection to the earth. Now we go into big supermarkets where meat is packaged for us in neat little containers, where we buy all kinds of products that we have no idea what's in them because we can barely say the name of the ingredients on the package. And so we are so far removed from our own interaction with the earth that it's pretty hard to care about it. And I really look forward to talking a little bit more about industrial agriculture specifically on this panel. I won't get into it now, but I think that's a really huge problem for climate change, for air pollution, and for water pollution, not only that, but our own health and animal welfare.
I think I just want to add a little bit in there that we have to be cautious, because there was a time when we were more connected with food, but in the U.S., there wasn't a time when we were really a local foods. We were surviving on a local food system. You have to go back very far to do that. The Midwest, the expansion of the Midwest, was really about expansion and about marketing that as commodities, as food. And so when we're thinking about the changes we're making now, when we see the impact of this, we can't simply look to the past. We can kind of look back to see what worked from the past, but we're really thinking about going into a different direction now. And we can do so wisely. We have a lot of science behind us, and that's the perspective I come. I want to make wise decisions about going forward. So I just want to caution, I think there hasn't been a balance, really, to ask your question. We've been out of balance for a very long time, and we can just make smarter decisions about how we're out of balance.
Now there's over 7 billion of us to be out of balance.
Kenneth Boulding said something I thought was very wise. He was an economist, an author. I think he taught a semester as a guest professor at Butler one time. But he said, to answer your question, Jim, things are the way they are because they got that way. And this is a complex world, and that was a refreshing answer for me. So that freed me up to put my energy on how we get to the next phase of viable living on this great planet.
That was good. Why do I always have to follow up really good answers? But, I guess I really don't, because you said this is out of order.
You can jump in before him next time.
Down. I agree with everything the panelists said, and I also think that providing perspective on humanity prior to today really helps understand and gives us maybe some positive focus, which is that humanity is not, we naturally find order. We are efficient. We constantly want to be more efficient. And as we try to find efficiency, industrialism provides efficiency, perhaps we went from point A to point B with the wrong means and the wrong tools. Right. So if we want to become more efficient, and efficient meaning more sustainable, and more efficient meaning continuing humanity as we love it and know it, we can use the same tools that got us to this disastrous place to get us to a better place.
It occurs to me with this panel, it's dawning on me now what expertise we have in the area of food. So we'll probably be focusing on that most of all in this particular conversation, and we could get real spread out with this otherwise. But another sort of foundational question before we get into that is, who are the victims? If we're talking about environmental justice, we're talking about injustice, who is that against?
I hate to always be the first one
You're
butting in.
the jumper in.
I'm eager. Well, I think that if we look at confined animal feeding operations, which is these very large industrial farms where most of our meat comes from today, and if you want the legal definition, it's generally a facility that has over 700 dairy cow, something upwards of 125,000 chickens, just incredible amounts of animals all stuffed into one place, confined and caged. Their manure, their waste, is typically stored out in open, large lagoons where it is spread on land untreated. And if you think about human waste, which is really no different than animal waste, we treat that. We would never think of spreading our own human waste just anywhere without treating it. Yet we create now, I think I read a figure that livestock in the United States creates 5 times more waste than humans do. Yet we really barely regulate that, and it's causing huge, huge problems, not only water pollution and air, but for the people who live next door to these facilities. Some of them, clients that I've represented who have lived in their home for decades. They were farming families themselves, and their neighbor sold out to a big corporate entity that built one of these huge facilities, and then unfortunately, under the law, we've really put agriculture in this place where we admire it and we want to protect it, and so we've got laws in place that protect the typical farms, for example, the Right to Farm Act, that really gut the ability of the people who live next door to do anything about it. It guts their sort of legal rights, if you will, and our General Assembly this particular session passed another measure, another law that goes further in gutting those rights. So I would say that people that live next to industrial farms are largely victims of our current system. Jim?
I guess I want to expand on that to think about the idea that we make these decisions about the food that we buy and the food that we eat here locally. And some of the impacts are local or regional in terms of them, and then some of them are far removed from us. Into California, the workers who are exposed to the pesticides in the fields there and the environment that they're exposed to around those fields. So it's our decisions that are affecting them. That's one aspect of it. The CAFOs locally are another aspect of it. In terms of the agriculture in the Midwest, which is commodity dominated with pesticides and fertilizers, the Midwest is taking the brunt of the environmental impact for this corn-based food system that we have, both in the U.S. and even exporting that. So we take the brunt of that. So there's this division. And then we can take the food justice aspect of this that we're focusing on and think not only about that production aspect, about the inequality of the access to it in terms of consumption, and bring it really home to us here in our own communities, where there are communities in Indianapolis who have very limited access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's an interesting question in that it spans so many different groups of people when we think about different parts of the food system and food justice.
I think I just wanted to say something before you say something really great. I agree, and I also think that we're all impacted, and most of the people, if not all the people who in this room who have the conscience to come here at 12 o'clock and sit here. I mean, we're basically preaching to the choir, but most of our community and most of Indianapolis do not choose what they eat consciously. We've lost the idea of consciously choosing what we eat, and I mean, we all struggle to choose the right things to eat. And as a chef who's responsible for a campus of 33,000 students, when you make a decision on what you want to serve students, you have to understand that they're not making a conscious decision about what they're eating. So my challenge is I have a Chick-fil-A in the food court. How do I draw people from Chick-fil-A and bring them to a from scratch venue? Those are, we can take that kind of metaphor, that it's not even a metaphor, an analogy, and apply it to the grocery store, or to a place that doesn't have a grocery store, that just has a convenience store. That's who it's impacting. It's really impacting us all. And I think we need to realize that and start realizing that we don't make usually those decisions. There are people on top who make them for us.
I take some pleasure in being invited to be on a panel these days. I think it's mostly because I'm usually older than the combined ages of everybody else on the panel. And I don't think that makes me any wiser, but it does add some breadth of experience. I agree that we are all the victims of environmental injustice. I think children are maybe the biggest victims. Will have to bear the fruits of our injustice unless we do something remarkable and stunning, which I would like to hold out that we are in fact doing. We are in fact on a track now to turn injustice into justice. And whereas we are all victims of our own injustice and that of others, we will all be the beneficiaries of the actions and the innovations that are now emerging everywhere, even in Indiana. And I would like to focus there. I have been on. I've been a part of almost every movement for the last 50 or more years in the United States and some overseas. I think that we have in our generation the most challenging, the most crucial and critical decision and change to make of any generation that's ever lived on this planet before now. And I believe we are making it, and I believe that Indiana will be known in the next 5 years as a national leader in green innovation. And I want to say this, so long as I have the mic for a few minutes. Everybody in this room has a once-in-your-lifetime opportunity to make environmental justice happen, and that is our bicentennial. I don't think there's anybody in this room that was around in 1916. Am I mistaken about that? And so we're going to be, so when I say once in your lifetime, this is it. 2016, we're going to celebrate 200th birthday of Indiana. And I believe if we all make a decision to do so, we can unveil Indiana as a national leader in green innovation, and that would be a stunning achievement and would turn the heads of many and perhaps have a very positive ripple effect throughout Midwest at least, perhaps nationally and maybe even internationally, because nobody expects us to do this. You know, we're 49th in green. We are 45th in fitness. We are 39th in happiness. You know, we're at the bottom of every good list and the top of every bad list. You know, that's our injustice or our neglect. But it isn't the whole story. And there is a new story emerging. And it's that story that I think will help us change the picture that we now lament. And so I would just like to say, to answer your question, Jim, we're all victims. Of course, children and the poor are the biggest victims. I mean, they feel it more than some of the rest of us. Some of us can buy our way out of it. You know, I moved here to Indianapolis in 1980. In 6 years, I had asthma. Okay, somebody might say, well, maybe there were other causes, John. Maybe it wasn't environmental. You can tell your story. I'll tell mine. I think the air quality in Indiana is not that great, and it does cause asthma. And more of our children are carrying inhalers to school. It scares the pajamas out of me. But you know, we've got a history.
It's more of the children in the low-income areas and the areas dominated by minorities. That these are not, it's not equally distributed. You know, even at the level of Indianapolis, the air quality impacts are not equally distributed.
I totally agree. I totally.
In part because of lead as well.
Yeah.
I was about ready to conclude the lunch to end on that wonderful, inspiring high note of John's, but then you brought us back down again. Really,
you know, I think there is a point. We have to tell it like it is, and you do that so very well, and all of us have done that well. I just feel like we have a crisis right now, a crisis of hope, and a crisis of courage. And unless we can tell also the way it is, you know, for example, within walking distance of where we're sitting now, there's a company called Algae Wheel. It was started by a Purdue graduate, and I think is one of the most creative innovations in treating wastewater and creating biofuel at the same time. This is going to hit the market here in the next couple of years, and it's going to make Indiana famous among other places. Within an easy drive of here, you can go up to Ball State and see the world's largest geothermal installation. They're heating and cooling very efficiently 45 buildings on their campus. I could go on, take a trip around the state, and you just see these wonderful things emerging. Now, it's that story we need to tell. Because if you can remember The Music Man, where Marion, the librarian, on the bridge said, there were bells on the hills, but I never heard them ringing. There were birds in the air, but I never saw them winging until there was you. Now, we have got to find a way to see the birds and see what's happening around us and tell that story. I think it's a story to be proud of. And the more we do that, I think the more young people will want to stay in this state and make it the great example that it can be. Okay, I'm going to stop now for a while because I've taken more of my time.
I moved here in about 1986, and John Gibson was one of the first people that I met. He's really good friends with my mother-in-law, and he's been inspiring me now for 27 years or more. That's fantastic.
Somebody wanted to.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question that deals with food, and a lot of what happens with people in food is lack of time. So you're going to get something fast, whether you get it, and zap it in your microwave or whatever you do, and that may be part of the problem that poor people deal with too, in terms of not just poor people. I'm thinking of people who are highly educated. They don't know how to cook. Home ec has gone away in really bad. I mean, even when I took home ec, decades ago, it still wasn't very good, But people don't know. Like, poor people used to subsist, and quite well, and throughout Latin America and Asia, on rice and beans. Does anybody know how to take a dried bean and soak it and cook it? There are things that you can make if you plan ahead. Doing it in a crock pot, you can freeze. There are lots of things that you can do. But if people don't know how to do it, and I know very few people. I mean, I'm a boomer. Okay, my generation's some. My daughter is a good cook, but almost generations younger, people just don't know how to cook. So are there any movements around to teach people how to cook and cook healthy? Does anybody know? Or how can you volunteer with that?
I mean, you've touched on a really important part of the complexities of solving the food problem, and really reflect the complexities of many of the environmental problems. That it's not, we talk about environmental justice, but really it's social justice and environmental justice and economic justice. And the same thing goes when we think about solving these problems in the food system, that it's not just about providing access to food or a grocery store to buy it in, it's what do you do with that food afterwards? Do these people have the time to cook? Do people who have time to cook the food, do they have the right to do it? And I think there's more recognition as the movement grows that this is a problem. And so I think we're moving in the right steps. We see programs developing on this. I know Wishart is working on this aspect right now, and I bet, Nate, you know of some local efforts towards this as well.
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is we need, when I say we need to go back to the basics, we need to think simply, and we need to start where the low-hanging fruit is, right? Because that's where we make the biggest impact, and that's what keeps us going. We look for the low-hanging fruit, we find the nice ripe apples, and it gives us more motivation to climb up the tree and reach the ones that are harder to get. And part of that is looking at inner-city schools, the idea that most in impoverished families send their kids to school, they get subsidized for 3 meals a day. And I have not actually had the privilege yet of going to the Indianapolis school systems and looking at their kitchens, but I've been watching the Indiana surplus auction websites for years now, and I have seen a lot of great kitchen equipment go to surplus.
Going the wrong way.
They're throwing it away because there's one place that is cooking all this food. And so when we look at industrial food systems and where we want to start with the children, right? Because I hear all the time, well, we have pizza, but we also have a salad bar. And I said, well, I would pick the pizza. What makes you think that a 6-year-old wouldn't pick the pizza, right? So, what's lucky about food service is that food service is very totalitarian. Right, we can help. We can make the decisions for them. We can provide them stealth health. Right, we don't have to tell them it's healthy. We just need to give it to them. We need to start with the basics. And when we think about teaching an entire population how to cook, You know, people have the time, because we live in Indianapolis, and there are people who live in New York City who have to use a subway for 2 hours a day. You know, and we don't figure that into our lives. So if we want to figure into our lives cooking on a regular basis, and it's really that important to us, then we'll do it. But the problem is, it's never going to be important if we don't stress the idea of real food to children first. And we need to educate them.
I just want to jump in. There's a glimmer of hope here. There's a great movement going on nationally, the Farm to School movement. So this started out as just a nonprofit that was separate from any sort of the governmental connections. And now USDA has embraced this Farm to School, and they're working with this Farm to School network that exists nationally with state representatives everywhere. Laura Hermuth is our local representative for this in Indianapolis. And what they're doing is they're saying, okay, this worked in our state. Okay, so how do we reproduce that? How do we bring that here? This worked in our state. Okay, let's take that element. This did not work. Let's not go there. So there are some hopes here, and that's getting, to expose the kids to the food that we want them to eat and to want to learn how to cook. And then the Farm to School movement is actually integrating what they're eating with their curriculum. So they're working to say, okay, let's bring this into the classroom and see what the components of this food are. How would you put something like that together? And invite the parents in on days to do this as well. So there's this hope that, after recognition of the problem, that then we can really try to solve it.
And I would just say, putting in sort of my legal slant into all of this, that part of this is, the broader picture is about taking our democracy back and participating in it. Regulations and laws are passed every day that could either promote policies that enable local food production and enable, teach parents how to cook, and, all of these things that we're talking about could be driven by policy and need to be driven by policy, but our voices aren't being heard. And in fact, I'll go back to my initial point, the voices that are heard are by the very industries that we're complaining about, who have lots of money to make influence on our policy. So part of this is just participation in our democracy, and we have to do it.
And I must say, by 2016, I would love to see the city of Indianapolis, all of their food procurement come from the state of Indiana. And I don't think that's impossible at all. In fact, I'm constantly hearing on the radio that it's just not possible, that if we want to feed 20,000 children, it's just not going to be safe enough with all these people and all their hands in that food. It's bogus. It's complete bogus, because I do it in my kitchen every day.
It takes 0.03 acres to provide a diversified produce that any of us have in our diet or should have in our diet per person. That is not a lot of land when we look at the land around us. That's prime farmland growing corn and soy. It's not for a lack of resources.
John, do you agree?
I agree. I'm enjoying this, yes. I know there are lots of naysayers out there, and there's a lot of people that are so discouraged that they don't feel we can possibly turn the ship around in time. And I think we all need to be cautiously optimistic about this as well. But if the kind of energy that you're hearing, especially from the younger members of this panel, takes root, and we all do what we can. We tell a positive story. We learn to cook differently. We plant a garden in our backyard. By the way, on Sustainable Indiana 2016 this year, we are trying to honor gardeners. I don't think many of them realize how important planting a garden, providing a future of food security, getting in touch and caring for the land, and building community through garden. So we're trying to go around the state and find gardeners and give them a nice sign to put up, the Bicentennial Green Legacy Garden, and give them a certificate and put them on an honor roll on our webpage, tell their story in the press as much as we can. But if we keep honoring what's going on and make that our principal story, it doesn't mean we can't acknowledge the injustice that's there. I'm not talking Pollyanna stuff here, that, you believe everything is good, so you do nothing about it. But I just think that we are in a position to make a huge turnaround. We won't have nirvana, or we won't have heaven on earth by 2016. I don't mean to suggest that. But even if we could get a good many households and school cafeterias, they're even using 20% of local healthy food by 2016. That would set a trajectory, in my opinion. And I think they would be so pleased with the preferred taste and so on. Talking about schools, I went up to Appleton, Wisconsin. There was a school up there that became rather famous for its story. They were a school where the kids that didn't fit into other schools went. So you can see this is going to be a tough school to deal with. And they had a principal who worked with a local bakery. They went in, they took out all of the soft drink coolers and vending machines. Now that's hard because these vending machine companies, they pay the schools. So the schools, because they're broke most of the time, because most of us complain about taxes, they don't want to get rid of these. But this school did it. They took them out. They completely revamped what they had in their cafeteria, all healthy, local food. And the kids groused, you know, for about 2 weeks, and then they fell in love with it. They wouldn't change it. They played soft music in the school, over the school. And what happened was that the kids settled down. These are tough kids now. These are the wild kids of Appleton, Wisconsin, the kids that couldn't learn anything. Their grades started going up. They started settling down. They got off all that sugar and all that junk food that they were eating in their cafeteria. I mean, I thought it was a remarkable story of what can happen when you have the courage to take citizen action. And so I'm still going to be the optimist. And I think I'm on a panel with optimists as well.
In answer to your question also, there's a number of groups in town. The Food Coalition, Slow Food Indie, there's a vegetarian group as well. I'd be glad to connect you to those. My email address would be jpoyser@nuvo.net. And I really just sit there and people send me emails and then I send emails back out. That's what I do. There was a question behind you though, sir?
Yeah, I had seen an interesting study. I didn't see all the details about it, about processed sugar, sucrose, use of sucrose, and about how there's some much more deleterious effects on use of sucrose than had been previously thought of, other than some of the traditional effects. And I'm just wondering, should Indiana policies start to push toward the eventual long-term elimination of sucrose within our life?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. 100%. I mean, because not only are we looking at highly refined sugars, we're looking at highly refined starches that we convert into sugar. So when I have a daycare on campus, and we serve 200 meals to infants, between the infants to 6-year-olds. And when we first came in there and I looked at the food, on an average of 18 to 20 ingredients per item, we are at an average of 5 ingredients now. That's the problem. The problem is that we're not holding people accountable who make decisions on large scales, right? We need more chefs in schools. We need more chefs who care about food in universities. We need more chefs in jails, in the prison systems. We need more chefs. We need more people who care, because nobody is going to care as much as we do about food. We have a huge responsibility, which is why we elect a mayor, which is why we send our children to school, because we have teachers who teach our children because they do a better job than we do, right? We need to take that same academic approach and we need to apply it to food. We need to hire the people who can make the right decisions for our children, because they won't.
And once we make these institutional changes, we all benefit from that, not only by our participation in those institutions, but we're strengthening the very system that we all rely on. So we're building these networks. We're building it up in terms of economics. We're building it up in terms of knowledge base, the science behind it, as well as just the knowledge in terms of cooking, right? So you're exposed to it in the institution. Your kids are exposed to it. You bring it home. So we all benefit.
And it's not a bipartisan issue. I mean, it's not at all. When we look at healthy food, local food, it
is a bipartisan issue. It's not a partisan issue.
I'm sorry. Yes, it's not a partisan issue. That's correct. We're looking at, there's a commonality, and the commonality is security. We need to secure our food. We need, we put all of our eggs in just a few different companies. We have, I know we all know this. We have IBP and ConAgra and all these different. Sir, did you need a comment? Because
I just think we're way off the subject of environmental justice. Nutrition is nice. We're talking about children playing in raw sewage in Indianapolis. We're talking about air emissions that are poisoning people. We're talking about many, many problems that are environmental justice. And I hope the ACLU will hold a session that really deals with environmental justice, that actually has somebody of color up there who's been impacted by it. You could have had Dick Van Frank here, who did a study with the Urban League on the air pollution problems affecting people, on the fact that we did a joint press conference with Dr. Kane warning people, do not eat the fish. They're highly contaminated. We have people that are at real risk on environmental justice issues. When I was in EPA in Chicago, we had a group of women that came in from the far south side of Chicago, surrounded by the coke plant, surrounded by Sherwin-Williams paint, surrounded by the sewage sludge beds. And they said, we think we have air problems. Our regional administrator, a good Lithuanian, one of the first people to move out of his neighborhood, said, well, you know it's those people. That was the start of the federal environmental justice program. I was on the national task force. When I came down to Indiana, I started the program here. Our present governor killed the program.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in? Glenn, I think everybody in this room agrees that the environmental justice injustices that exist are great, which is why we're all up here trying to, let me back up a minute. I get asked all the time, what can I personally do to address these injustices that I care so much about? And so, my response coming at this from a legal angle is, well, participate in your system. Get out there and let your voice be known to your legislators. Support groups like Hoosier Environmental Council that do that legislative work. Support groups like Hoosier Environmental Council that does, legal advocacy. But people really at their core want to know, what is it that I can do? Mm-hmm. Sure, I'll make the donation to your organization, but what can I do? And I think what this panel is trying to get at are sort of those personal choices that we can all make that, well, I know, but wait. It's nutrition, but if we talk about nutrition and that concept that I talked about earlier with industrial factory farms and how they impact the people that live next door, if we're all making choices that we want our food to come from locally grown, traditional farmers that don't have that environmental impact, that's going to help that person who is suffering the injustice. If we talk about the...
help children playing in raw sewage?
No, but look at all the problems...
The Sierra Club and the NAACP filed a legal action.
I agree. Glenn, I'm with you. We're all here. One of the suits that I have is against ArcelorMittal for all of its sludge piles that it's dumped out next to Lake Michigan. But you can't, or members in the audience can't go out there and dig up that sludge pile. We have to enable and empower people to make those changes within themselves.
I agree. I think that my name is Kate, and I'm 21 years old, and I don't know how old everybody else is here, but I have a lot of friends who are my same age and a little bit younger, and all of them complain every day about how awful it is and how bad, the world is getting. And I finally wanted to do something, and so, you know, I just recently started getting active in all this stuff, and I think that our top priority, other than innovation, because I think innovation and science are going to lead us into the future, there needs to be a drastic change in government policy. There are people who are corrupt, who want to keep us in this legal system and in this insurance system where they are keeping us unwell on purpose to get our money. And it is causing global catastrophe, and it is awful. And I want to know what kind of political movements are really taking place that I can be a part of to get these people out. The fact that Monsanto, on the board of their executives, has a member who is a part of the FDA is absolutely outrageous. That is a complete violation of rules, and they should be held accountable. And it is up to the people of America to do that. Nobody else can do it. We can't wait for legislation to change. We can't wait for a new election. We have to do it now. And we can do that now by protesting, by all of these people, all of your organizations, banning with other organizations in Illinois, across the Midwest, and we can change it. But I feel like discussions are great, and, you know, opening up people and educating people about what is going on with, you know, all of our carbon pollutants and, you know, everything that's going on. But at the same time, we need a political revolution. We have to enable people to make other decisions for our well-being, not for money.
But you can join with the NAACP and the Sierra Club, who filed legal action against Bart Peterson, who got rid of 4,000 failing septic tanks in Indianapolis that are in poor neighborhoods with children playing in raw sewage. This administration has gotten rid of 7,000. We need to have people go to the Citizens Energy Board and say we must keep moving. There's another 20,000. We have more septic tanks than any other city in the country. We have soil that is totally unacceptable for septic tanks. They never should have been put in. So here is a significant human health problem. It's just like we worked with Dr. Kane to try to alert people on the mercury. We have a power plant that is still producing mercury, that is still going into our water, that is still poisoning our children right here. There's issues like this. The other things are nice, but there's issues like this. If we can make a difference, we must make a difference. There's people, whether it's Citizens Action Coalition, whether it's HEC, whether it's Sierra Club, we need to focus on these things. Having good nutrition is great, but number one is basic human health, and people are getting dumped on in our city, in other cities. You go up to Michigan City, they have a coal-fired power plant right across the street from a poor black neighborhood, emitting the mercury into it. There's atrocities like this that are not getting better nutrition. It's life or death.
There's the commonality, I think, among this is the communication and the education and this desire for us in this room to do something. And we look around and we do not see a lot of people of color in this room. So what can we do? Well, we can help to communicate. We can help to involve. What are the barriers? Why do we have environmental injustice? Well, we have environmental injustice because of the cost, the money involved in these cases. So participating in these organizations is something that we can do. It's also the communication of the problem. And time aspect of it. How do we communicate with, here we're segregated, that this audience is segregated from the populations and the communities that we want to be touching. So why can't we reach out to that?
And by the way, I would encourage New Vote. In the past, I even had my article and my picture on the front page. But I would encourage New Vote to focus on these issues about, the reason we got Bart Peterson to change is because we had TV. We had newspapers that were pressing him, and these are the type of things.
Hey, Glenn, I don't mean to shut you down, and I am so with your frustration because I do get calls on a monthly basis of people who are suffering who want me to take on a citizen suit for them, and I'm one person and I can't do it all. And the problems are huge. But to say that the people up here or that anyone in the audience is not doing the right thing or not, not approaching this in the right way. There are all sorts of ways that we can go about doing this, and they're all necessary. And so I think, to the extent that maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but that you're blaming Nouveau or the ACLU for not having appropriate panelists probably is a little bit counter to the message that we want to get out to people, which is do something. Do whatever it is within your expertise to do, and do it, as opposed to criticizing what somebody is doing.
Well, sorry, I'm just saying is that to me, children playing in raw sewage is
We
a
all
higher
agree.
priority than eating the right lettuce. Right?
It's not about just the right lettuce. I've been at IUPUI for 1 year, and within 1 year, I've reduced the usage of styrofoam containers by 2.5 million containers. Okay? I also advocate for Meatless Mondays. If I could advocate for a Meatless Monday that could reduce carbon emissions by not providing the meat to students that are factory farm
Millions
meats,
of tons of nutrients that go into our waterways.
It's the idea that the impacts come from individuals, and the point I was making is that the impacts come from individuals who have the power to make decisions. And I think it's ultimately a reality, and perhaps not a reality that not all of us like to face, is that the socioeconomic model of those people who make those decisions, that's perhaps why we're sitting up at this table.
We need to wrap up soon. It does strike me, too, that this is a bit of a fractal. We could have 4 bicycle activists on this panel. We could have 4 microbrewers. We could have 4 IPS teachers. We could look at environmental justice through so many lenses, like a fly eye. So, again, we could have been real broad-based. I'm excited about everybody has to eat. Now, if we could just eat raw sewage, we'd take care of both problems at once. There are organisms that can do this. Indie Talks do they have a planned talk about this, or?
No, but you had said they expressed interest in the fact that we were doing it, wish they had done it themselves. So I think this is the beginning of a lot of conversations. Can I steal this from you? And hopefully one of the messages that you got from this panel discussion today is that the people that are adversely affected by environmental justice are also some of the same groups of people who are adversely affected by other types of justice. And why is that? And why don't we give a damn? So, if you can walk out of here and start giving a damn, then we've done something worth something today. And having said that, we have a gift bag full of civil liberties and green goodies that Jim will pick someone out of or Nate will pick somebody out of the bowl to win it, and you have to be present to win.
He left 10 minutes ago.
As it.
Seriously, you got to stick around to win.
That's right. Read it to me.
Fred Mandelkorn.
Yay!
All right, thank you to Kelly, ACLU. Pamela, you have something to say?
I just wanted to put in a plug for an event that's happening. The annual Environmental Health Summit at IUPUI is happening May 4th. 2 years ago it was air. Last year I think it was water. This year it's going to be the local food system. So you can check out our website on IUPUI or for IKE.
I can't keep up. I mean, today at IUPUI there are 2 events going on with a major sustainability person. Tomorrow night We Are City at IMA. Every single day there's something conscious happening in this community, and usually there's more than one thing. It's getting frustrating. This is a great problem to have. We have so many things to go and invest our time and efforts in. You want to get involved with this particular panel? John Gibson's Sustainable Indiana 2016, one of the most ambitious large-scale projects ever. Kate, is she still here? The 21-year-old? That was your name, right, Kate? It's great connection for you. This organization needs you. Hoosier Environmental Council, you can become a member of that and supporter of them. They actually talk with legislators all the time.
And become a member of the ACLU while you're at it.
I was getting to that. Thank you all. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
behave. I'm so